is going on, everyone? It is Steiner here with another episode of Secondhand Talent. We have an incredibly special guest today. We have with us record masterer Maor Appelbaum of Maor Appelbaum Mastering. He's worked with artists such as Meatloaf, Yes, Faith No More, and so many more. Maor, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Graham. Uh, I think that it would benefit to have some kind of explanation of what does it mean when we're remastering an album? Like what goes into that? Why do we do it? And we could talk about your most recent project, remastering the Gatherings album, Always.
Sure. Now, we have to remember a few things about mastering. It's not just an album. You can do mastering for singles, EPs, albums, compilations, uh, for video, videos of songs. Each one requires a different thing. When you master a single, it's just on that song, regardless of anything else. When you're doing an EP or an album, then you have a collection of songs that might have a story behind them or a timeline behind them that you need to master to keep the consistency and cohesiveness of the whole sound. When you're doing a compilation, then there's not really a cohesiveness and consistency because there's different eras, but you still want to keep the listener kind of connected with it on the volume levels or tonal changes. Um, when you remaster a project, um, you can remaster it from different sources. A lot of times the original mixes are long gone and very hard to find. Sometimes you find yourself remastering from a master that always already was done. And sometimes you're remastering from a remaster that was already remastered because that's what's given. And in other cases, you get the original tapes to work with or a digital capture of those tapes. What's important in the remastering process is to be faithful to the result that was already existing in the mastering if it was a good one. If it wasn't a good one, then you try to take it to a different direction, which is much better. But if you're looking at an original master that was really good, the idea of the remastering was to improve upon it based on what the technology can give you today. And then what was missing before, you can emphasize, if there's more clarity and depth, detail. If back then there was not enough low end or high end, and now you can boost it or fix it in a certain way that will sound better, then that's one of the things you can do. Um, Not every remaster is from the actual source that's the original. Sometimes those remasters are from safety copies, and then they're not always sounding exact the same as the original. Sometimes it was a DAT tape that was connected to the console, but the original master was done from a half inch or quarter inch tape that was connected, or or it could be just a copy of a copy, which then you have generation loss, and it depends how good they kept the tapes. So when a remaster is done, not always you get the right source material to work with, and hopefully you do. But if you don't, that can of course um, change the outcome. And sometimes you find later on the original master, but before that you found another version of it which you thought was the original. And some remasters are actually remixes. They're called remasters because, yeah, it is a remaster, but they're actually new mixes. They found the original tapes of the tracks and they made a new mix that sounds different. And then you're mastering a remix. So they will still call it a remaster because it's not the original, it's a remaster, but you're really mastering a new mix. So remix and remastered. Um,
Okay, all right, and that yeah, I've heard that term before, and I honestly did not know exactly what that meant. So thank you for clarifying that for me. And obviously the source material, you want to get the cleanest, best source material possible. Um, but you're saying it's not, it's it no, nothing's impossible. when it comes to at least trying to, work with audio in whatever format it's received.
No, no, it's not that nothing is impossible. It's just that if you get something that doesn't sound that great, even if you're improving it, it's not going to sound that great.
Right.
Like you have
The
to work
the
with what you're
ceiling is
given.
only so high, right?
Right.
Like,
And then
yeah,
sometimes you get something that sounds okay, but they want to change because some of these remasters are done by labels that want to have a different version, or like the A&R wants a different sound. Even if they liked what was before, sometimes they want another take on it. So a remaster can go so many directions, from how original sources you're working with. And sometimes the original mastering that was done was the right thing for the sound that people liked. And if you get the original mixes, they don't sound the same. And now there's a missing link here. Why that master originally sounded that good, and you're trying to do that with the mixes, and it just doesn't sound that right, like in the way you wanted, because the master was doing a lot of stuff to it. And now when you're getting the original mixes, they don't translate the same as what the result was then. So then you have to learn how it should sound and maybe get there, or you need to take the actual master. So the whole world of remastering is a very complicated and convoluted, and it's very dependent on the material coming in, the how good it is, how good condition it is, because that affects too. And it could be a very big hit or miss. Also, you want to make sure you're not alienating the audience from what they know. There's always going to be people who will say, "Oh, but I like the original," because
sure,
they got
sure.
used to it. But also, when t taking that in mind, if your remaster is alienating it from what it should be, not in a good way, then people might not like that. And there were eras that some remasters were done that way, where they were just crank the level and make it, you know, sounding different, not in a positive way, just for the sake of remastering. But sometimes, again, that's what the A&R wanted, and they wanted that type of sound. Sometimes they just want another take on it that has a different sound. And for them, it's like, well, maybe it doesn't have the fullness of this, but it has kind of a nice feel, and maybe it works. So good, bad, that's kind of the in the eye of the beholder, or in the ear of the beholder, and there's different ways to approach it. um but it's not uncommon nowadays to see that records were remixed and remastered, and I've done a bunch of those records. The Gathering, for example, always, that record was remastered a long time ago already, but this version that I worked on was actually remixed. So the whole mix sounds different than the original, and the original record, I know it from when I was a teenager, and I liked the music on it. But of course, the quality back then was different because they recorded and mixed it, in a different environment than what now was possible to do with the original tracks and remixing them. So now it got more power and energy. And of course, I took that and I mastered that, which you can say remastered that, but basically it's a mastering of a new mix, of a remix.
Got
So
it.
remix and remastered. It was a pleasure doing it because I know that record. As a teenager, and that was a breakthrough record in that field of metal. It was quite
Yes.
new to do those things, and that's one of the records, that I've done, that I remastered. I've done records for Fight, which was Rob Halford's band. I've done a box set for John Wetton with 8 CDs. Six of them were solo albums that he's done that I remastered and added bonus tracks to them, and then two more records that were just unreleased materials. Um, I've done a lot of other like remasters for vinyl only. I did like two records with Slaughter. Uh, uh, was Hear No Evil and The Wildlife. Uh,
Wildlife is a phenomenal album. Yeah, that's fantastic.